Today on Flip the Script, we're excited to welcome Ria, a dynamic marketing strategist and founder of the White Box. With experience in luxury brand management, including her work with Lamborghini Bangalore, Ria now leads her own startup, crafting unique weekend leisure activities and employee engagement for top corporates. Join us as she shares her journey, insight, and vision.
Welcome, Ria.
Hi, thank you.
We're so glad to have you on the show.
Thank you. I'm glad to be on this.
So to begin with, Ria would like to know more about yourself and how you transitioned from hotel management to luxury brand management and eventually to event curation and management.
Hmm. Um, I feel like when I first started, like undergrad, was in hospitality management, and that was because at that point I wasn't too sure as to what I exactly wanted to do, but I had a lot of people in the hospitality industry around me, which kind of influenced me into thinking that this is something that I might be interested in. But the part of hospitality which interested me the most was again luxury. Like that aspect of it is why I was interested in the whole hospitality industry in the first place. Um, while studying hospitality, I soon realized that it's not all glitz and glam. And that's when I kind of like pivoted into luxury because I knew that that's something that I'm really inclined towards. Um, and while I pursued luxury management, a large part of my job, which kind of luxury management took me into Lamborghini, and a large part of my job was curating experiences, curating events. And that kind of led me to where I am today.
That's amazing. Do you want to just like tell us really quickly, like what do you mean? What does luxury mean to you?
Mm, I feel like that when you think of luxury, um, everybody has a very different answer to that. Like for me, like it can mean in different aspects. Like for example, if I'm going to a fine dining restaurant tomorrow, and if that restaurant has given me a sense of luxury in terms of like the ambience is one thing, but also in terms of say service, what they're doing to actually go out of their way to make me feel that yes, we are different from the others, or like we are taking that special care towards you. So I feel like luxury is kind of like looking into those attention to details that will make the customer really connect with your brand or with you.
So you would say it's like care and understanding.
Yeah, and I feel like uh, that's what luxury does. Like even with when I was with Lamborghini, our main focus was as to how to connect with these customers who have everything, right? They can afford to buy anything and everything. So what do you do to actually make them feel special? So luxury kind of as a brand, it also has to be as to how honest and how real you are in connecting with your customer as well.
Very rightly defined, leading, it leads to me a very exciting thought. There's a difference between luxury brand management and versus marketing for regular brands or other brands. And it leads to a very important part, which is the acquisition of a customer. And how do you budget out the time that you allocate towards acquisition of a customer versus engaging with that customer? Because nobody is going out there buying two or three cars of the same brand. And especially when it comes to Lamborghini, which is something so unique across the globe. And then when you compare it to the hospitality experience, which is perceived by many more customers as compared to Lamborghini, how do you balance the act?
Mm. Balance the act in terms of acquisition versus
Yes.
engagement. So I can only give, because I have only had one job in my life. I can only give the example of Lamborghini, and not of any other different company. But firstly, I might have to correct you. There are some of our customers who have 2 to 3 Lamborghinis as well.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's not just a one-time impulsive purchase. Um, and also, I feel like when it came to Lamborghini, it was more like it's such a dream car for so many people. So in terms of like acquisition, it's like first you have those people who know that okay, this is my dream car, I want to get it. Like people say that why does a company like Lamborghini need marketing, right? So
Yeah.
it's not about trying to sell; it's about kind of retaining your customers. that is what it mainly was for Lamborghini, as to even at Lamborghini, as to like, what can I do to keep their loyalty, to have their like to have that relationship with them. So I feel like, yes, there are a few customers who know that, okay, this is my dream car, I want to get this, but there were also a few customers who have kind of uh, interest in other sports cars like a Ferrari or an Aston, or others. In terms of that acquisition, yeah, there are some cases where it's taken 4 to 5 years to even convert a customer. So
Oh, wow.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. Nice. And what would you say are your biggest like learnings and challenges from working with Lambo? Like, were you able to actually use any of that later on in White Box?
See, I mean, with Lamborghini, because it was also my first job, I have to say I did learn a lot. And in terms of uh, just the kind of people you meet, right? It gives you such an insight into not the luxury industry, but the uber luxury industry. So luxury can be something like, somebody can afford a Louis Vuitton bag, like say two, three people can, but out of that, only maybe one person can afford a Lamborghini, right?
That's true.
So that kind of really gave me an insight into a different market altogether, a different kind of clientele altogether. And in terms of challenges, as like anybody would face in their first job, all of that was there. So, but all in all, one of the best experiences of my life. So, yeah.
That's amazing. And I'm glad that you had such a great experience at Lambo. So, what actually inspired you then to start the White Box? Why did you decide to go the entrepreneurship route?
Honestly, I never wanted to be an entrepreneur. I was always happy with doing it, like, with the idea of like working for somebody else. I was not that driven or ambitious to like want to start something of my own. Also, because my family, nobody has ever started a business of their own. My dad worked with ITC for 40 years, I think. And
Wow.
yeah, and my mom also, like for about 30 odd years. So it's like we're a family of people who have believed in being an good employee, going up the corporate ladder, and all of that. Um, but when I actually started wanting to do something of my own was during COVID, when my brother was watching a lot of Shark Tank. And at that time we were at home, everyone is doing a lot of things together. And we were all
Yeah.
sitting in the living room watching Shark Tank with him. And I was like, okay, such interesting ideas. And that's when that little spark came that, okay, maybe like I can also start something of my own. So yeah,
So, you owe it all actually to Shark Tank, everything
maybe,
that you built.
maybe a large part of it, yes. But inspiring people, they really, I mean, that show really inspired me.
Absolutely. And like White Box, I think originally started out as a gifting platform. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
So, how did it evolve from that to where it is today, and why did you move in this direction?
When I started White Box, it was because one of my friends had actually gifted a Mad Over Marketing workshop to me.
Oh,
Um,
nice.
and when she gifted me that workshop, it was not a bag, it was not a dress, it was not something materialistic. It was something, it was an experience which made me feel so happy. And I was just like, this is amazing, this is beautiful. So it kind of came into my mind that, what about starting a platform that gives experiences, because I had not seen a lot of that in India. So that's how the idea kind of came about. And then, of course, you pivot over the years, you see what works, what doesn't work, and you kind of keep making those changes like constantly. So I feel like now also, I feel like maybe a year down the line, there's something I'm doing right now that I might not be doing a year down the line. So
And I think you've touched on a very important aspect of why we're doing this show as well, the importance of pivoting and like, you know, taking account of trends and actually going with the wave rather than it's good to stand out, but you also have to like go with the wave and listen to your customers.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, so my next question, we were going through your website and we saw like a lot of interesting experiences like the sushi rolling and candle making. So, when Whitebox offers all of these activities, how do you decide what to keep and what to remove? And what sort of like customer feedback do you get on these activities? So, are you seeing trend onto some kind of activity they prefer or anything like that?
Yeah, so like I said, when I had started off, there were a lot more experiences that I had. You know, I was also doing, like I had tied up with certain salons, certain restaurants in maybe like curating a set menu that is available only on my website, or with certain salons that were providing like these packaged services that were available only with me and that they themselves would also not sell. But I just saw that the need of it was not that much. Because maybe like, okay, fine, I'm offering a slightly discounted price than the salon is, or like maybe that the restaurant is. So is it worth going through the hassle of going through me, somebody who's new in the market, or just directly go to the source, right? Yeah, that kind of made me constantly pivot and remove experiences which I feel like I didn't see like a future for it basically, and understand from what people were actually showing interest in and curate more of those kind of experiences. So culinary experiences were a huge part of what was working, what is working rather. So yeah.
Would you say people like experiences that they're learning something over just like going and experiencing a good meal or a spa?
See, I feel like I would love to go and have a nice spa day, but at the same time, to kind of switch it up, I would love also sushi rolling workshop, So I feel like it's a mix of both, wherein people want to experience different kinds of activities. So that's why we try to kind of do different experiences on the white box. We also kind of try and come up with some one unique event per month. Like we did like a Mexican night, which was taco, tequila, and salsa. So that is not something that we usually do on a week to week basis, but it's something that we kind of like bring in once every month to, do some different activities to kind of engage people who have tried the different culinary master classes or a sip and paint or whatever. So yeah, so constantly just experimenting.
Yeah. And I think I really have to ask you about like the talk of the town, the singles mixers. How exactly did that come about, and what do you see that, like, what's the future of it?
The singles mixers came about from a dinner table conversation between me and two of my other friends. One of my friends who was single was complaining about uh, being single, and she was like, "Where do I meet people?" And I'm like, "At White Boxes events," because
Yeah.
there's so many times I've met people who say that, "Oh, this was so nice because I made some new friends over here," whether it's at a workshop or a sip and paint or whatever it might be. So that's what I told her. I'm like, at a white box event is where you meet people. And then she was just like, yeah, but like single people. And then she was like, oh, there should be a singles mixer. And that's how the idea kind of came about. And I was like, yeah, that is a great idea. And I kind of like worked on it to kind of make it happen with
And what?
their help, of course.
You've covered a very
Good
interesting
God.
part that our generation is looking out for, which is singles mixers. But you also do some very interesting work now, switching from curating experiences for like singles mixers to corporate engagements. I mean, it's a completely different spectrum altogether, and you're dealing with a very different
Yeah.
kind of clientele with very different demands. So, would you like to highlight your experience working with Google, Porsche, or Upgrade, and how you curate experiences for these people?
Uh, Honestly, my worry constantly is that when corporates come to my website and they see a singles mixer on it, what are they gonna think? And I was like, this is not a good look. So that was one of the reasons I kind of separated the singles mixer from white box, because it was gaining a lot of popularity. Yes. So the singles mixer, which is called Cupid's Soiree, I even started a separate Instagram page for it, because when I want people who are coming onto the white box, I don't want it to associate it with only singles mixer, because that's just a very small part
Great.
of it, right? But I feel like the main thing with what we do is these weekend events, and singles mixers is kind of one of those weekend events that we have. And the other aspect of it is corporates, where we do employee engagement for them. The clientele is, yes, completely different, but not necessarily also, because we have a lot of people from corporates attending our singles mixers. So, so I don't know if
It's
it's
just,
that different.
just when they're wearing a different hat.
Yeah, they're just wearing a different hat.
And how do you go about designing these experiences for corporates? What would you say is different about what you offer to corporates versus other people?
See, we're not a event management company. We're not a production house that does like big setups and etc. So like a lot of companies reach out to us saying that, hey, we have this launch. Can you like execute? And I'm like, no, that's not what we do. So we are into like curating experiences or kind of making your existing like event into a more adding that bit of like
Personal.
yeah, personal touch or like adding an experience to that overall event. So we deal with more small scale groups and actually paying attention to the little details and curating the experience, etc. So yeah.
Nice. Okay. That's really exciting. And like we've noticed that you have quite a bit of like experience, and I'm sure you've learned so much. So we'd like to jump into the segment where you can probably use your experience to tell our listeners maybe some stuff that you've learned throughout the journey.
So, with your multiple backgrounds, which have across Lamborghini and now at White Box, and how the events industry or the experience sector has continuously changed in the past 20 years. When we were in school, for us, an experience would be attending an origami workshop, versus now when we are at age where we would like to attend a cocktail mixer or something of that sort. So, the experiences have evolved as we have evolved in our lives. And on those lines, I would like to understand, from your point of view, how do you see the future of brand experiences evolving, and what should the brands be prepared for as the customer expectations continue to grow?
I feel when it comes to the luxury industry specifically, the constant challenge is how to up your own game. What I constantly faced at Lamborghini is also that so we used to have this one event, which is Pan India event. That is there, wherein like all our Lamborghini customers come in for this drive experience. And the constant struggle we always face is because every year used to be so good. So you're like, what do you do to make it even better than the previous year? It honestly is such a struggle. But I feel like that's why you have to come up with the most bizarre ideas sometimes and make it work to actually make a statement. So I feel like sometimes people are like so restricted by their thought or like, no, this might not work. No, I think of the craziest ideas and then later on think about how to make it work. But don't, have that boundary in your own mind as to like, because I saw myself doing that. I'm like, no, but this is not going to work. But I feel like spit those ideas out, work with your team, brainstorm. Many minds, when they work together, it's magic. So I feel like just not having any boundary to your imagination is how you can kind of curate better and experiences as you go. And I think being also like keeping up with the trends right now. Like I saw this thing that Lamborghini was doing, wherein they were giving some from the factory itself. They were giving something to do with AI. They were giving these chips to our customers as gifts. Yeah, I can't exactly recall what it was, but it was very like in keeping up with the trend, And I don't want to quote something wrong saying that they did that. I don't want to do that, but something wherein they were integrating AI, because that's what it's all about right now, and kind of integrating it into the gift hampers or something that they were giving our customers from the HQ. So I feel like you have to just constantly keep up with the trends.
Very rightly said. I think I just, when we're speaking, I was just thinking on the lines where, you're being so innovative in your approach towards curating these experiences, your team, and, putting it forward in a very different way every year, because the experiences can't be redundant. So in today's world, we only talk about innovation in tech or in, very mainstream industries. But this is such an innovative approach towards everything, not just from the curator side, but also from the consumer side, because you're forcing the consumers to adapt to new innovation style, which is which is
Yeah,
actually blending your consumers along with the trends of the society. It's not just limited to Instagram or
yeah,
few people seeing it. It's also about the consumers
yeah,
adapting it. So it's a very good thing. I think we are heading in the right direction as far as our society is concerned. And on those lines,
yeah.
even the luxury sector has evolved immensely in the past 10 to 15 years. The growth of luxury brands in India in the last decade is exponential as compared to what it was in the early 2000s. And on the same
Yeah.
lines, how do you see the luxury market growing in the next 5 years or 10 years? And do you want to give any particular advice to someone wanting to break in the same industry or in luxury brand management?
Honestly, honestly, I'm not the right person to be giving advice to somebody entering the luxury industry, because I feel like that is somebody who's been in the industry for many years can give that advice, right? I'm somebody who was I worked with Lamborghini for 3 years, so I don't think I have that knowledge to kind of give that. Um, but I just know that the biggest consumers of luxury are the people who aspire to have luxury. It is not the like your LVs, your these luxury bags, all of that. If you see, yes, you have your people who have a lot of money who can just buy like those bags casually on a day out, but that's a very small percentage the of the clientele of these brands. The main chunk comes from the people who aspire to have luxury. Um, it's the people who kind of have just come into money. It's the people who want to buy their first luxury bag. It's those people who are saving and who want to buy those kind of luxury products that is the main clientele of these brands. So I feel like yeah, with I think it's only going to grow, especially this particular segment is only going to keep growing.
Absolutely. And given like the aspirational middle class that we have in India, as well as like people wanting to go out and buy
Yeah.
new things, I think that looks positive for
I
Yes,
these
think it's
brands.
the amount of people that yeah
I think the
that's
brands are trying to manage or equate the consumer's aspiration to their brand's perception. I think when you evaluate those on an X and Y axis, that's where you find the sweet spot of where the consumer is going to buy it.
yeah. And I feel like with this whole thing of luxury brands sometimes not being very accessible, like certain brands, wherein you have like a wait list, etc., it just creates more of a hype around it and wanting to get your hands on
I
it.
once read about the hoax marketing that Apple does. It's about the pricing and position of the particular product, and the more it's
Uh-huh.
basically what our generation does in terms of dating, which is called benching or breadcrumbing. You're doing it with we're doing the exact same thing with our consumers who are wanting to buy our products. So yeah, I think that's what
Yeah.
is also important for that brand to be perceived as something that's unique and has an USP that not everybody can attain what they want or if they want it.
Yeah.
But we've also done a fair bit of research on what you do in your regular life apart from white box and curating events, and we have come up. We've seen that you are a content creator. So where do you see content creation going? And this is an area where you can actually advise because you've been doing it for a while. And what would you like to tell someone who wanted to break
uh
into it?
I'll be honest, I have, yes, like there are, a relatively okay number of people following me. It's, so you have different categories of influencers. You have like nano, you have micro, and you have macro, right? So I come under the micro influencer. But I I don't think I'm a content creator per se, because I feel like that's actually become a proper job. I have so many friends who are content creators and I have so much respect for them, a lot more than I used to in the past for the occupation in general. Because I see the amount of work that goes into it and it is not easy. It is really not easy. Because a brand is coming up to you with a brief, you are ideating, you are creating, post production, editing, everything, right? There's a lot of work that goes into which people are not seeing in those 30 seconds of the reel that's being posted. Me, on the other hand, I don't create content per se unless I'm getting a collaboration that comes my way. Like create content, I mean like actually coming up with a storyline and like putting in effort for like a production, post production, etc. So unless a collaboration is coming with me, I don't actively go and create that kind of content. The content that I like creating and I organically create is travel. So because I enjoy actually looking at my own highlights from the trips I've had in the past, it's like a scrapbook Instagram. you know. So I feel like when it comes to content creation, that is something where my interest lies, like travel. But I would not say I'm actively creating content, because that's a whole different job, which I don't think I have the bandwidth to entirely do.
Do you think it's a lucrative career though? And like, what do you think about AI changing things right now?
I have definitely seen a drop in the amount of collaborations that people have been getting. That's because, firstly, brands are seeing that what is the ROI that they are actually getting from these collaborations. Um, Sometimes I think some of these brands that I've seen in the past, wherein they just see that this person has, say, 100,000 followers, let's get them on board, without doing any research as to whether this brand is, whether this person is actually fitting my particular brand, if what kind of value are they going to bring. Instead of seeing that engagement, they're just seeing the number of followers and just blindly going ahead with it, which makes no sense. But at the same time, the content creation industry is still, I would say, at its peak. But from what I hear from my friends in the industry is that there has been a slight dip, and in the future it will be. um, in terms of content creation, what is working nowadays for brands is UGC, user generated content. That is something brands are really focusing on and really putting money on. They are, in fact, reaching out to, say, creators also, saying that, we'll do the shoot, we'll do everything, but we just want you to be in the video to make it look as natural as possible.
Right.
Because that's a direction that brands are also moving towards.
Okay. And would you suggest someone get into this, like if they love the camera and all of that?
100%. 100%. Oh my god, if you're good at this, the amount of money you make is insane. 100%. Like, I feel like uh, I wish I had kind of taken more advantage of the time wherein, like, my followers were going up or whatever, and done something about it. Maybe I wouldn't have had to start maybe I wouldn't have bought a Lamborghini or start White
You
Box.
know, this question was a slap on my face from my co-host Ramya actually. So yeah,
Yeah. So, I mean, now let's just move into like your advice from your entrepreneurship journey. What were the biggest challenges you had starting White Box, and what were the learnings you had from the few years that you've been doing it?
uh, it, I don't know if this can be considered a challenge, but fear. Like,
I think it is. Yeah. I
uh,
think that's a lot more people than anything
yeah,
else.
like, I don't know. I feel like when you said the word challenge, and the first thing that came to my mind was fear. And I knew that, firstly, because I never wanted to start something of my own, number one. Number two, I was like, if I start something of my own, I want someone to do it with. Because I don't think I have the guts in me to start anything on my own and fail at it. Like, I feel like that was something that was a little intimidating, because I'm like, what if people see this? Because I'm like, I'm very social person, wherein I like
Yeah.
I was so scared of, like, people kind of seeing me fail, you know. But you really have to just take that step. You have to be like, even if it doesn't work, it's fine. But are you okay with kind of living with that thought that you never gave it a shot? And, like, one thing that I feel like I personally have always been proud of is that I've given a shot to whatever I wanted to kind of try. um
That's
yeah, that's something that I feel like proud of. That, okay, I don't look back and think that, oh, I should have tried this and I've not done it. So yeah, I feel like that was personally one of my biggest challenges. And apart from that, you constantly are faced with challenges when you're just starting off. Whether it's in terms of, for me, like, learning about legalities, learning about taxes. I had no idea. I mean, I don't know if it's a now when I look back, I don't think it's a challenge, but at that moment it felt so overwhelming. I was like, no, I don't want to do this. So it might seem as a challenge at that point, but later on it just seems like, okay, yeah, I learned that. you know
yeah.
so
So it's about having that learning mindset that
I
every day is something new
I
and
think so. I think so. I mean, I feel like I also have, like, I've made like a note, uh, wherein I've written, like, challenges faced with corporates, learnings, and I've written that down. Always take advance payment. So things like that. So you're constantly learning from
true.
your experience.
Absolutely. And like I think one I assume something that might have also been a challenge is being like a first generation entrepreneur.
Mhm.
So, did you face any challenges there, and how did you move from that employee mindset to a founder mindset? Because they are like significantly different. How would you advise people in your position to do that?
Uh, I wouldn't say that it was a challenge in terms of being a first gen entrepreneur, because I feel like my family is incredibly supportive. And I'll be honest, it also comes from a sense of privilege, wherein it might not be the nicest answer for a lot of people to hear, but it's the truth that when you have your family kind of supporting you, saying, okay, if you don't want to kind of continue doing this job because I don't know if it doesn't make you happy or if you feel like you're not learning more or whatever, and you want to start something of your own, fine, it's okay, we've got your back. That's something I was incredibly lucky to have, like here. And so kudos to all those people who kind of do it with no backing whatsoever. But in my case, I do have to say that I was grateful enough to kind of have had that support and that backing of my parents. Yeah, so in terms of that, it wasn't a challenge per se. Uh, the challenge was moving from an employee mindset to a founder mindset, because have had no experience in seeing how that works firsthand. So it was learning everything on your own, you know, being more disciplined, telling yourself that if, because there's no one pushing you to do things, right? Like there's no one like you don't have KPIs to meet. You don't have like your boss is sitting on your head saying like, where is this deadline is not met, where, whatever.
Yeah.
I've always met deadlines, but I'm just giving an example. So it's not that. So it's you kind of motivating yourself and pushing yourself to do things for yourself. And the thing is that at that moment, you're not seeing results because you kind of need to get that work done to see those results. That journey, wherein you have to really push yourself is the hardest, I feel. Because you have to be the one who pats yourself on the back. You have to be the one who kind of lifts yourself up also. So that was, I would say, like maybe a challenge.
And would you say that's the integral difference between like an employee mindset and a founder mindset?
For me, I would say for me it was. Uh, and of course, there are a lot more things that you learn along the way, like um, about delegation, about knowing how much you can and cannot take on your plate, being more organized, kind of having like a bifurcation of your time as well. Because when you're starting something, and especially I did not have a team per se, so I was everywhere. So if you're not kind of forcing yourself to be organized at that point, I don't think it's possible to do it.
Absolutely. That's good. Okay. And my last question to you is, so Whitebox is a very founder-led brand, and you are like the face of Whitebox. How did you manage to build the brand around Whitebox and the Ria Pies brand? And what advice would you have for people in building their company brand as well as their own personal brand?
I feel like I had my personal brand before I had Whitebox. I kind of when I came back to Bangalore after studying in Manipal and in Bombay slash Italy as well. When I came back, I did not have friends per se or much of a social circle in Bangalore. I used to hate it. But I kind of had to force myself to get out there and meet people because I knew that I had to build a life over there. So I used to extensively go out, network, socialize, and that, I'm not even kidding, has really helped me in the process of building that box.
Okay.
Um, whether even if it's at parties, like you might strike up a conversation with somebody who is, I don't know, maybe working in a hotel or hotel industry, or they're working in PR or so. Like like building those networks have kind of helped me take White Box or build White Box rather. Um,
And would
so
what like in terms of networking, what would you tell people? How should they go about it? At least from your experience.
I have never been to a networking event, so I don't know how those go. But I have a lot of friends who go to networking events and who have really uh, gained a lot from it. So I would say that building your network is so important. So if it means, in my case, if it was kind of like going out of my comfort and talking to people, maybe being in a room full of people and knowing it's just one person, but not relying on that one person and going and actually starting conversations with other people in the room. So you kind of have to force yourself to get out of that shell. And my dad always told me one thing. He's like, "What's the harm in asking?" You know. So that kind of logic I've applied in a lot of situations wherein I'm like, okay, I need some contact in Delhi. I know this one person is remotely associated to that contact. I don't know him too well. Should I ask him or should I not? And then that logic comes. What's the harm in asking? And it has worked always. It might have not led me to my final destination, but it has led me to the next step towards that destination. So yeah.
Absolutely. And that was really great advice. And I think you spoke a lot about something I got was like stepping out of your comfort zone and like just facing fear head on. And I
Yeah.
think those are very important aspects in anyone's journey.
Yeah.
It was really lovely having you on the show today and like listening to your journey and everything that you've been through.
Thank
Thank you for being here and like being vulnerable and open and sharing with everybody.
Thank you. This is amazing what you guys are doing. Very, very interesting. Kudos to you guys. And thank you for having me.
Welcome. It's a pleasure.